Tonight on Greater Boston, the man who taught 2 Supreme Court justices, the Attorney General, and a president. Laurence Tribe joins me in the future of the Supreme Court and Joe Biden's role in shaping it, now that Justice Stephen Breyer has officially announced his retirement. Then, once hailed as the heroes of the pandemic, nurses are stretched thin, burned out, and leaving the profession in droves. The problem, according to several who spoke to the New York Times, hospital greed. I'm joined by a Massachusetts nurse who helped lead the charge during the longest nurses' strike in state history. Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer's retirement plan was made official today as he informed Joe Biden he would step down this summer.
I'm here today to express the nation's gratitude to Justice Stephen Breyer for his remarkable career of public service and his clear-eyed commitment to making our country's laws work for its people. I will select a nominee worthy of Justice Breyer's legacy of excellence and decency.
And as for who that person will be, the president has a clear list.
The person I will nominate will be someone with extraordinary qualifications, character, experience, and integrity. And that person will be the first Black woman ever nominated to the United States Supreme Court.
If the president succeeds on that last point, it would fulfill a major campaign promise. But with a court that moved dramatically to the right during Trump's presidency, there's a lot on the line for Biden to get his nominee confirmed. And as we all know, when it comes to this particular Senate, nothing is a given. I'm joined now by Harvard Law Professor Emeritus Laurence Tribe, whose students have included former President Barack Obama, Supreme Court Justice John Roberts, Justice Elena Kagan, and U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland, and who has argued before the Supreme Court 35 times. Larry Tribe, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, Jim.
So you're a friend of Breyer's, yet you've been calling for him to retire for quite a while. Is that solely a strategic call, meaning that he should leave office so that the Democrats still control the Senate when a confirmation comes up, or is there more?
No, that's all. I mean, he's still very effective, very smart, very good at dealing with his colleagues, tremendous justice, but it was time a while ago for him to make room for someone younger who would fill his place. And there are always risks. Some of the Democrats in the Senate are not exactly spring chickens. And we know that McConnell will pull out all the stops, do whatever he can. The closer it gets to, wouldn't shock me for him to pull out some new rule saying, oh, we're in a year where there are going to be midterms. It's too late to confirm someone. I mean, it's nonsense, but that's his specialty. And so I thought that actually last October, just before he turned 83, October, he would have turned 83 back in August, but last June, when the last term ended, just before he turned 83, would have been a good time for Steve Breyer to leave the court. I'm glad he's doing it now. He has an important legacy, and it's really important that it not be ruined by someone who is very far to his right. And the court is really lurching to the right in an unprecedented way, with unprecedented speed and with devastating results for people around the country, especially women, but really for everyone.
What is his important legacy?
I suppose I would say pragmatism, a lack of ideological rigidity, a commitment to certain core values of equal protection without regard to race or gender or sexual identity. And I think ultimately decency. He is really a justice for all seasons. I've written very favorable things about many of his decisions, some of them dissents. And I think he has a very important legacy, and I'm looking forward to the historic appointment of an obviously very well qualified African-American woman, a Black woman, to the court for the first time. It's well past due.
It's amazing you have to praise someone for being a decent soul. It's really a function of the times. Speaking of a Black woman, you tweeted in August of 2020 in light of candidate Biden's pledge. And by the way, this is before Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. Both Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson and Justice Leonardo Kruger would be superb SCOTUS justices, brilliant, humane, wise, dazzlingly credentialed, and savvy in the ways of the world, both judicial real. That both are black women is just a happy plus factor. I am assuming that for strategic reasons, again, Brown Jackson is the call by virtue of the fact that she was just confirmed, not only just confirmed, but confirmed with all 50 Democratic votes, including Joe Manchin, and 3 Republican votes. Is that not a pretty sound prediction?
Well, it's one of 3 very sound predictions. I think Leandra Kruger has a lot going for her, but also Michelle Childs. She, in fact, will have had kind of audition. She's going to have a hearing really quite soon. She is a district court judge in South Carolina. She is the one whom Jim Clyburn has favored for quite a while. She's also very brilliant. She's young, she's dynamic, and she will have a hearing on her nomination to the DC Circuit. So in a way, she will have had a kind of interview in public in a manner that will make it possible for the president to see whether she ought to be on his very short list. She's certainly on a short list of 6 or 7 right now.
Do you buy? Jim Clyburn was on the same Anderson Cooper show you were on last night, and Clyburn said that he was sure that she would have the support of the 2 Republican senators, Scott and Graham from South Carolina. Is that a hope or a reality, do you think?
Well, I think when Jim Clyburn talks, I listen.
Okay.
He knows his politics. I think he could deliver those 2 senators. And I think there's nothing about Michelle Childs that would make her a problem for them. Unless there's some racist element, I certainly hope not.
You know, again, referencing last night, there was a clip on Cooper's show of you testifying against Robert Bork in 1987, the legendary Bork hearings. We were talking to, and obviously a bruising battle. Chuck Todd from Meet the Press was on our radio show today, and he suggested something that I totally agree with, that this will not be a bruising battle because it's not in the interests of the Republicans. 1, it does not change the 6-3 conservative dynamic. And 2, a bruising battle would distract from what has been a very successful few months from them, focusing on what they consider to be Biden's liabilities with the American people. Do you buy that analysis, or do you think this is just like every other war that's been fought over Supreme Court justices of late?
I think I buy the analysis. I think the Republicans have everything to lose and very little to gain by putting the spotlight on this nomination. It will be historic. It will energize the Democratic base. They have nothing really negative to say about any of these nominees. And even though McConnell, I think, would, if he could, keep this seat vacant until the next presidency, and that could switch to Republican hands, obviously, I just don't think he's going to see the opportunity, and therefore he's not going to take the chance.
Let's talk about McConnell for a second. Even if he wanted to take the chance, in this Congress, the one through January of next year, in this Congress, he can delay the nomination, but if the Democrats stick together, he can't stop a nomination, correct?
I think that's correct. And so delay, which is the name of the game, would be the only card he would have to play. And that doesn't.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Just to say that doesn't do him enough good. There are contexts in which running out the clock is a way to win. I'm not sure that would be his strategy this time.
Speaking of running out the clock, though, getting back to the scenario you described a minute ago, should the Republicans take control of the Senate and in the midterm elections come January of next year, I don't find it preposterous at all to think that if there was an opening, let's say in February of next year, with 23 months to go till an election, or 22, that McConnell would fail to even hold a hearing on a Biden nominee. Do you find that preposterous or not?
No, I think he would fail. I think the Garland precedent is the one that he would follow. And when people would say, well, what about Amy Coney Barrett? he would find a way to distinguish that.
So
He always does.
can we return to the retirement issue for a minute, Larry Tribe?
Sure.
Justice Breyer joined me in 2015, and we talked about something that I'm relatively obsessed with, which is limiting the terms of Supreme Court justices. Here's what Justice Breyer said to me.
I would say there should be a long tenure. Whether it's a term of years or not, maybe it would be better to have a term of years, but it must be long, because you don't want a person in that job thinking about his next job.
You know, Larry, I read the piece. You and Nancy Gertner, Judge Gertner, who will be on the radio with us tomorrow, served on the Presidential Commission, Biden's commission on the Supreme Court recently. And you wrote an op-ed after the fact in the Washington Post, a joint op-ed with her, in which you said you were both leaning toward term limits and against the expansion of the court when the process started. And at the end of the process, you flipped and you were leaning towards expansion and against term limits. Could you explain both of those to me?
Sure. Initially, I thought that it was going to be relatively easy to adopt something that is popular nationally and that is typical around the world, and that is something like a 12 to 18-year fixed term, no reappointment. It wouldn't be very complicated, I thought, and it would be sensible because the position of Supreme Court Justice is the only position in our country that is analogous to that of a king or a queen. Sort of, you serve for life and you have great power for life, more power than kings or queens do these days. And I also thought at that time that expanding the court, given the historic experience and the rather negative spin that has been given to Roosevelt's court packing plan, was not a great idea. But after a very intensive period of months with hearings with dozens of witnesses, lots of reading, huge amount of time talking to one another, 34 commissioners, broad ideological spectrum, I ended up, to my own surprise, concluding that expanding the court by 4 members would be really a very good idea. It's not in the cards, it's not going to happen, but it's constitutionally simple. No one doubts the power of Congress to change the size of the court and to add it, and it's already been seriously packed and indeed stacked by appointments of dubious legitimacy for various reasons. And as to term limits, although I started where Steve Breyer is at the moment, I think, thinking not a bad idea, where you actually look at the details. The devil is in the details. How do you phase it in? What happens to the life tenure judges now when you have some new ones who are appointed for a fixed term? What happens even if they can't get reappointed, if they are young enough when they start, 18 years later, they still have a career ahead of them. So you begin worrying that they'll begin ruling in favor of the oil and gas industry because they want a job in that industry. Not a good idea. And there's also a very difficult problem of the McConnells of the world. That is, if you have a system of 18-year terms with a normal practice of 2 appointments for each president, what happens if a president is of the opposite party from the Senate and the president names someone and the Senate says, we're just not going to hold a hearing? So actually making it work turned out to be so complicated that although I'm not dead set against it, I think probably it wouldn't work.
Regardless of what reforms happen or none, which is more likely, and regardless of who fills Justice Breyer's seat, there'll be a ruling come summer on the Mississippi abortion case. Are you among those who believe that we will see the repeal or at least the gutting of Roe v. Wade?
Without any doubt. Whether they use the words Roe v. Wade is hereby overruled, or whether they overrule it without saying it, Roe v. Wade is basically dead. They have allowed the state of Texas to ban abortions after 6 weeks, which if Roe v. Wade were alive would be intolerable. And they've allowed it under a cockeyed scheme in which, because of the ingenuity of the way it's designed, nobody can really effectively challenge it in federal court because they have basically farmed out the enforcement to vigilante bounty hunters who are not supposedly agents of the state, although a reasonable reading of the law would say that if the state is putting them up to it and offering them limitless amounts of money, 10,000 or more with no ceiling, to stop abortions, they're really agents of the state. But Roe v. Wade is basically dead. Affirmative action is basically dead. There's very little mystery. Now that the court is solidly stacked with ideologically driven far-right justices, except on matters that are less contentious, there's very little to predict. It wouldn't be nearly as interesting teaching constitutional law now as it was for 50 years while I did it, when the mystery is gone. You know, you don't have to say, hand me the envelope, please. You know what's in it already.
Larry Tribe, we only have a minute or so left. If we can just change gears quickly. You wrote a couple of pieces and have spoken a lot about your disappointment, my word, not yours, your word may be stronger, in the Justice Department under Merrick Garland in terms of the failure, at least you believe, to at least investigate possible crimes by Donald Trump. Did the indictment of the head of the Oath Keepers for seditious behavior and some of his members cause you more optimism about Merrick Garland maybe going up the chain little by little?
It did. And also the announcement by the Deputy Attorney General just 2 days ago that they are now investigating criminally at the level of the Justice Department the plot that really didn't depend on a violent insurrection, the plot to have fake electors send in phony certificates so that they would give the vice president an excuse to send the matter back to the states. That was a plot to overturn the election. It was a conspiracy, a seditious conspiracy in violation of a very serious federal criminal statute. And the fact that the Deputy Attorney General has said that they are now investigating that means that there is no way for them to stop short of Giuliani and Mark Meadows and the kingpin himself, Donald Trump. Whether he'll be indicted or not, I'm not sure, but I've been calling for an intense, comprehensive, rapid investigation. I have not been, deciding in advance whether the case is absolutely strong enough to make an indictment appropriate, but I think it will be, and I'm glad that Merrick Garland seems to have stepped up to the plate.
You must have taught him well. Larry Tribe, it's good to see you. Thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next up, it's no secret that among those who've borne the brunt of the pandemic have been nurses. For nearly 2 years, they've been exposing themselves to COVID day in and day out, working long hours, chronically understaffed and overstretched. And that's when they don't have a bunch of people out on COVID quarantine. But according to several nurses, part of a video op-ed in the New York Times, that shortage is intentional, brought on by hospital greed.
There's not a shortage of nurses, there's just a shortage of nurses willing to work under those conditions.
If you don't have enough nurses, patients will die. They will become sicker and they will die.
There have been many instances where patients that die that shouldn't have died. I know that unequivocally. Families, they feel like you've done the best job that you can. And the reality is we're not.
I'm joined now by one of the nurses you just saw, Marlena Pellegrino. She also played a key role in ending the longest nursing strike in state history at St. Vincent Hospital in Worcester earlier this year. She's co-chair of the Massachusetts Nursing Association's bargaining unit. Marlena, congratulations on that, and it's good to see you again.
Thanks very much. Thanks for everything.
That video just knocked me for a loop. A bunch of nurses, people should watch it, but if they haven't seen it yet, tired and mad as hell and can't take it anymore. And a really important point you all make, this just is not just a function of the COVID pandemic. This predates that as well, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's the hidden secret, I think, in healthcare that the general public doesn't know, but this has been going on for a number of years. Nurses just pushed to the limit, not being able to care for their patients and put in positions where it's just untenable.
And the hospital, you all contend, I know this sounds pathetically simple, but I think this is the message. The hospital makes more if a patient gets less care. I mean, that essentially they are embracing the bottom line over whatever consequence there is for the patients who are trusting them. Is that not the pretty clear message?
That's the clear message we've been getting from healthcare administrators and healthcare corporations for years. The less number of nurses you have at the bedside, the more money the hospital makes, and the poorer care the patient gets. And their top priority is their bottom line. It's not the safety of patients. And nurses have taken a stand. They've had it with that. It's not right. It's not ethical. And we're doing everything we can to stop it.
You know, and you and your colleagues took the ultimate stand almost a year on strike. But as someone who used to be a union president myself, I think that people naively, outsiders think you fight, you get most of what you want, which you did on staffing issues after almost a year. But when you return to work, what's the feel between the employer, in this case, Tenet Health in a faraway state? What's the feel between you and your coworkers who gave a year of your life for the struggle and the people who just kept saying no?
Well, the feel on our side, anyways, is that we're going in there with our patients as our top priority. We want to get back in the building, stabilize this building, bring some healing about, and start caring for our patients. We hope that feeling is mutual. We go in there, feeling very proud of what we've done, but also knowing that there's going to be an adjustment period. 10 months is a long time. There's that hospital, there's been a lot going on in there for 10 months that has brought the level of care down. And we would like to see our hospital return to the beacon it once was. So it's about patients first. Whether you go on strike, it's about putting patients first right now. We want to get back in that building, give patients the care that they deserve. That's why we're proud of the contract we have. We want to use the language we have to better our patients. And we're walking into that building, trying to do that every day.
All of us have read about nurses leaving the profession. It's seen in the video. Video mentions that based on surveys, 40% of nurses are seriously considering leaving the profession. The one thing I learned was what we just played from you. I have mistakenly been saying for a long time that we have a critical nursing shortage. But you contend there's not a shortage at all. There's simply a shortage of nurses willing to work under these kinds of conditions, right?
There are millions of nurses in the United States, and many have taken themselves away from the bedside purposely, not able to, wrestle with their conscience, not being able to provide care for their patients because the bottom line is more important. And at a certain point, when you can't put your patients first and you feel like you're doing more harm than good when you show up every day, you just cannot reconcile, the ethical standard of that. So nurses they'll take so much and then they will move away from the bedside. And you worry when we all get older, when our children or grandparents need care, who's going to be there? I mean, I worry about that myself.
I've heard a lot of the rhetoric, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way, which always made sense to me about you need only a reasonable number of people under the care of a nurse. But in this video, you quantify it in a way that really is shocking. You quote The Lancet, which is obviously one of the most respected medical publications in the world from the UK, saying that the odds of a patient in a hospital dying go up 7% for every additional patient that his or her nurse serves. Did I get that right?
That's absolutely true. So every patient, over 4 patients that a nurse cares for, has the risk of all kinds of complications, including death. When a nurse cannot, pick up on subtle changes in a patient's condition, when they can't give them the time and attention they need, people fall through the cracks. And that person is a loved one. And it's very sad to see, but money comes before patients in these hospital industries, and it's been going on for years. And it's something that is the public is not generally aware of. You walk into a hospital, you think there are enough nurses there, you're going to get the care you need, but in the end, patients suffer, and nurses can't reconcile themselves with that any longer.
What's really depressing? You watch the video, and I think most people who see it will say something's got to be done. And then you do a little search and you find out that you and your colleagues put a question on the ballot in Massachusetts to do a reasonable staffing level. It was crushed 70-30. And then you read a little more and find out it's because the opposition, the hospital industry, spent $25 million to kill it. It can't be done on a hospital by hospital basis. Not everybody is willing to go on strike for a year of their lives to do this. So what's the path from here to there so that we don't wake up someday and find the whole system is imploded, Marlena?
The path is that people need to pay attention. The public needs to pay attention to what is going on in hospitals. And we need legislation to limit the number of patients a nurse cares for. Every patient that's in a bed is someone's family member, and it might not mean anything to you until you walk into a hospital and you're looking for that nurse who's caring for your husband or your wife. You're waiting for pain medication. You're waiting for a patient to come out of surgery. You can't get updates on patients. It's something that is very important, but I think the public has been naive to the fact that it's been going on. I don't think that people can reconcile themselves with the fact that these corporations put profits and their willingness to put power and greed ahead of patient safety is real.
Well, step one in getting rid of that naivete is to watch that video op-ed in the New York Times and take it from there. Marlena, congratulations on your contract and your work, and I really hope you stay at it. It's good to see you.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been an honor.
Today is International Holocaust Remembrance Day, a day set aside nearly 2 decades ago to honor the 6 million Jewish victims of the Holocaust and millions more who were killed by the Nazis. And as the founder of Faces of COVID on Twitter, Alex Goldstein, noted today, the pandemic has claimed the lives of many Holocaust survivors who deserve more years to educate and tell their stories. Goldstein shared several of those stories today, which he's kindly allowed us to bring you here as well, including Italo Servi of Massachusetts, who escaped deportation to Nazi death camps and met his wife while studying at MIT. Rabbi Avraham Romy Cohn of New York City, who saved 56 families while fighting the Nazis with a group of Jewish partisans in Czechoslovakia. Ruth David of Iowa, who escaped the Holocaust via the Kinder transport at age 10 and dedicated her life to teaching of its horrors. William Good of California, who hid in the woods with his father, sabotaging Nazi rail lines. He came to America after the war and became a beloved physician. Lillian Eckstein of New York, who survived Auschwitz, saving lives by stealing food for others. She said goodbye to her family over the phone. As Alex Goldstein put it, may their memories be a blessing and may their light never be extinguished. Again, these were just some of the stories he shared today. You can find more at twitter.com/facesofcovid. And if you lost someone you loved to the pandemic, you can share your story there as well. That's it for tonight. Please come back tomorrow for Talking Politics. Nearly 2 years into the pandemic, should policymakers be doing more to help parents and caregivers of the youngest kids? Plus, Boston's vaccine mandate for city employees extended yet again, and the race for governor has a new candidate. That and more tomorrow at 7 on Talking Politics. Thank you for watching. Please stay safe.